I'm sure we're all familiar with something like this. This is a standard 2-bay NAS from QNAP. Same thing can be made from Synology, Thekis, all the different people that make network attached storage. Now, these obviously come with their own Linux OS and other fun stuff, but being DIY people, why buy something off the shelf when you can go absolutely insane, probably spend 10 times as much and build your own DIY NAS, which is what we're going to do today. Welcome back to Bare Metal Tech, guys. I'm Shannon, as always, and today, I know that was a little funny way to intro it, but we are truly making a DIY NAS. This is something I wanted to do since I shoot for you at 4K 60. Now that YouTube fixed their uploading at least somewhat, I want to get back to actually uploading 4K videos rather than the 1080p 60 we've been uploading. One problem with that is the file size coming from the camera is quite large. And even when you render them out, they're quite large, and they tend to take up a lot of storage. So NAS was inevitable. I have a 5-bay Thekis over there. I have the 2-bay QNAP you saw, but I wanted something I can truly expand upon, or possibly even multi-purpose use, because with NASs, normally people select very low power chips. What you're going to see is I built something a bit more on gaming rig level to make sure that we have enough power to do all the offload duties we might potentially do in the future. So today's episode, we're going to be looking at part selection, getting it together, and showing the final product. But we will have further videos, if there's interest, to talk about like what OS we select for our NAS, whether it be a Windows Server based or even just Windows based with like SMB sharing and maybe some possibly even VM stuff going on. That's all potential in the future, and I think you'll see some of the part selection kind of heads toward that direction, along with expandability far beyond what you can do with a standard NAS. Now, I think the first part that doesn't really even need a major introduction. Let me move the motherboard actually. But the thing that's going to make this actually look kind of like a NAS is the Node 804 from Fractal Design. I actually reached out to Fractal when I had the idea for this project, which was slightly before I actually started Bare Metal Tech. I started kind of conceptualizing what I wanted this NAS to be. So I reached out to Fractal and said, hey, I want to build a DIY NAS. I want to make a video showing how I'm going to build my storage repository for all of my digital media, all of the stuff I'm creating content for you guys, all the images I take of new products as I review them. I want like a digital vault that's a backup for my other NASs that do some of the digital media for my internal media consumption, because this will be like its own locker for a lot of the important files that I need to save for what I create for you guys. And right now, trying to put all that in my main rig has become quite trying. So the Node 804 has a very clean aesthetic, but most importantly, it supports mounting 8 3.5-inch drives. Now, that's important because I also do have, probably should take inside the bag before we unbox it here, or unbag it. But we have a 8-port or dual SAS port HBA here with Cache Vault. So this will be the backbone for our storage, which obviously offers expansion, multi-port like extenders. Not necessarily something we're doing right now. As a matter of fact, we're starting, let me show you the actual storage media we are installing in our DIY NAS to get started. Presently, my NAS with dual redundancy RAID 6, which may have been a poor choice because you lose 2 drives worth of capacity. So this time, if we end up going with something like FreeNAS, we will be testing the OSs to see which one works best for our usage. We'll probably be doing something like a Z1, which is similar to a RAID 5. It is a parity. I just did a thing. It is a parity base, so it has 1 drive that you lose for redundancy. Okay, now to the storage. These trays slide right out, and we have 10 terabyte WD red drives. These are made for NAS storage. As you can see, I have 4 of them in this enclosure, and I'll grab some B-roll as well, showing the drives mounted in their vertical cages in here. And then I have a 5th one mounted up in the front bay. with 3 extra locations so that I can get up to 80 terabytes in this. Obviously not all usable, there will be some for redundancy. So figure right about now, after formatting and everything, and having about roughly 20% space reserved so that we're not maxing everything out, you're probably gonna have about 38 terabytes worth of storage. That's not a lot, and obviously there is a lot more that we can accomplish with this. But basically, right now we're just starting off far ahead of what we have now, which is the RAID 6 and my Thekis with 3 terabyte drives. So about about 8.5 terabytes worth of storage, which, as you can imagine, with 4K 60 video, becomes quickly exhausted, along with other media that I have internal to my network. So now I'll be able to split this off into specific RAID groups, and that's kind of the goal of this project, is creating something that we can have some fun with, we can do some cool follow-up content on, and we can show you guys some of the cool prowess available if you're willing to dip your toes in the water and kind of get yourself figured out as far as what you want to do with a rig like this. Now, being network attached means we can do a lot of things, including like a network attached either ingest server, which obviously part of the storage or file server portion will actually be part of that, but we can even have it role specific things like a render offload server where I can actually utilize, actually this is a good time where I can bring up the motherboard we were using. Being that this motherboard is micro ATX, I wanted something pretty stout, so I went with the Z370G Gaming Strix from ASUS. This motherboard I have personally used quite a bit. It is a very solid motherboard, good component choices, plenty of connectivity for what I need, along with having 2 slots. So if I want to have an offload slot in the future, for instance, a graphics card to offload using NVIDIA's new NV encoder, I can throw something like a 1660 or 1660 Ti, leverage that for some offload rendering and things like that, especially if we decide to virtualize and do some PCIe pass-through. But that's all stuff for the future. The next part of it would obviously be the heart of the system, which is a i7-8700K. This is kind of fucking tradition, because normally NAS, or like your servers, things like that, normally you want them to be lower power. That's where you run into some limitations with the NAS like I showed you before. It is a Celeron, some of them are ARM-based, some are Intel like Celeron, really low-end, not horrible chips, but if you're looking to do some heavy lifting on them, you're gonna find their limits really quickly. With the 8700K, if I decide to make this a virtualization server so that I can virtualize a storage like NAS or a storage server component with also, let's say, a virtualized environment for rendering video or any number of possible things. This has 6 cores, 12 threads, along with a good high clock speed, and we can add plenty of memory to make it however we want it to be. And that's going to be a learning process hopefully we'll be going through together. Now, backing this up for main storage, normally you can boot things like FreeNAS off of a thumb drive, but there's reliability issues there. Potentially, let's say a thumb drive dies, what have you, or we decide not to go with FreeNAS. Last thing I would be doing is booting like a Windows or server-based OS off of a thumb drive long term. So once again, our friends from Corsair stepped up. We have an MP300, which is a 2-lane PCIe drive, NVMe, plenty fast for what we're going to be doing. It's like well over 1,000 megabytes a second read, well over a gigabyte a second potential. This one should be more than enough for what we're going to be doing, since most of the time it won't be doing a whole lot unless, once again, we start building VMs and setting them like, let's say, small VM containers on the SSD, and then just utilizing the large storage for where it's going to be dumping cold data. Memory, Corsair again. I know that normally when you're doing something like a FreeNAS box, things like that, you want something with ECC, but being that we're going with 8700K, we're going with a more attainable platform for most people, something that you can build in your own home. We decided the new hotness, the Dominator Platinum RGB, because most importantly, we know that Dominator Platinum memory, at least from the stuff I have in my rig, all of my Dominator memory has always been really solid. So I don't have to worry about potential failure, lifetime warranty, all that stuff. But most importantly, it actually looks kind of kick-ass, and that's because they have the new Kepelix RGB LEDs, super tiny RGBs, low power. Obviously, these have little building block designs, which I'll show you in some B-roll, showing kind of how the color flow works. It's not like your standard smooth color flow like you see on their Vengeance Pro memory or anything like that, but I digress. it is something that I feel it just adds a cool aesthetic, especially being that we have a window on this side of the case. Since we're going to be able to show off the hardware, it's worth it to have a little bit of pretty stuff. And speaking of pretty stuff, we also have the newest H100i Platinum, I believe, yeah, H100i RGB Platinum. So this one has fully addressable ring going around the pump. It's the newest ASUS, I believe, Gen 6 pump. I'd have to double check, but it's the newest Gen ASUS pump. This is a brand new cooler from Corsair. So we'll be actually deploying that, at least for the time being. However, if this is going to be a long-time service system, we will have to keep an eye on that because even though it has a 5-year warranty, last thing we want is, since most NASs sit off in a corner, fill with dust, and just go to crap. I don't tend to let my systems do that, but I'm going to lie and say I don't let that happen, but my thickest NAS probably has more dust than air at this point because it sits down on one of my hardware racks and I don't really pay attention to it, and that's a reminder to myself. After this video, I'll probably go blow it out with my compressor. Now, for Psu Duties, I know everyone's on the hype train of fully modular, and I tend to agree with you, but for this system, since it's not, it will be pretty, but this case, the Node 804 has a back chamber where the cables can go. We went with a simple value segment. This is still a very solid quality because it's a Corsair power supply. I don't think I've ran across Corsair power supply I wouldn't recommend at this point, but a Corsair, and excuse the box, it's had better days, but a VS650, and I know 650 EU, you know, it's not like a, you know, it's not a kilowatt power supply or something crazy, but this will do the job. Honestly, it's like, I think 80 plus white. It's not even, yeah, it's not even 80 plus like bronze or gold or any of that. But at the end of the day, the difference on your power bill is not going to be monstrous. And as long as you know you have solid components in your power supply, you don't have a lot to worry about, but you will, obviously, you know, having like a platinum or titanium power supply, you will get that little bit of, you will get that, actually not a little bit, but you know, some extra percentage of efficiency, along with potential for super duper high-end components. Something like on my test bench, I have an AX1600i. That thing is like the top power supply, all the groundbreaking technology, all this good stuff, but for this, doesn't need it. I mean, it's going to be driving hard drives. This will not even have a GPU right away. I have a GPU sitting over there. I just want to see what we want to do with this box before I dedicate a GPU to it, because GPUs, even though they are plentiful in my lab, I do need them for testing and whatnot. So I'd much rather have those available for testing until I find a use case, or this finds its final destination as far as what its overall use case is going to be and how hardware is going to be allocated. Because being that this is a 16 gigabyte kit, if we are doing virtualization, we will find the limits of that really quickly. So that is something we have to think about. And it may be that we pick up another kit of this for 32, or possibly even go with some of the newer higher capacity DIMMs to equal out to 64 gigs if we're really going to push this as a production level virtualization server where we can run some of our production off of it. Now, with that being said, I think that covers most everything that's going to be going in this rig. So now I'm going to go ahead. We're going to, I might time lapse this and throw it in the middle, but if we don't, basically I'll be back with you once the build is done. And we'll take a look at how it came out. I'll discuss any issues we ran into, what made sense, what didn't make sense, why did we make certain decisions as far as how we cable manage, how we set things up. Because remember, this eventually will likely have a GPU in it, not just the iGPU, so that we can use either, like for instance, I can leave the iGPU for doing quick sync, but I can also test it versus, let's say, NVENC to see which one works better for our use case. This is all going to be trial and error for me, folks. I've never done a DIY NAS, so I really hope you enjoy this. I know this is not your standard NAS build. Most of you would probably go with like an i3 or like a low-end Pentium processor. It just makes more sense. But in this case, since it's such a wide gamut of things this system may potentially do, we have to decide where we want this to go, which means I started from the high end so that we give it basically a massive amount of capabilities, and then we decide as we scale it backward or upward what we want it to do. Now, before I get started building on this, there's one last thing I wanted to make note of, is if you're just looking for a NAS, you don't want to buy an off-the-shelf one, you want something that you can kind of cut your teeth with and play with, you don't need all this hardware. You don't need most of it. You can go much lower end. You can go with a small ITX system, couple hard drives, even a couple small SSDs if you just want to play with it and figure out what it can do. You can go with a much lower end processor, don't need a GPU. You especially don't need a RAID card. But being that we're looking at potential large expansion in the future, I want to be able to carry this across. And one cool thing I have observed with FreeNAS, trying it once before, is that FreeNAS, you can literally move it from system to system. You plug the hard drives in and load up FreeNAS. It's hardware agnostic for the most part. It looks at it and just goes, up, here's my, RAID Z1 or what have you. Here's all my hardware and it's good. I just wanted to offload from the PCH all of the storage directly into CPU attached lanes on a RAID card, because then it makes it easier if I just want to swap it into another system, even though I technically could do so. There is limitations to how many ports you have on a motherboard. This gives me a lot more expansion capabilities, as these can actually break out to fan out off of like fan out cables and things like that, or even through expansion boxes if it eventually I end up moving into like a 4U storage server or multiple tiered servers. This can all feed out accordingly and just continuously expand. But if you're just looking for simple home storage where you're going to run, let's say, Plex or something like that, where you copy all your movies over, you rip them digitally so that you can just watch them through your network, then a standard system, not needing a crazy high-end CPU like an A700K or even a crazy high-end board or any of that stuff, it's not needed. So now I'm going to get to the build. I'll be back soon. And now it's been about hour and a half later. Here we have our finished DIY NAS or storage server, whatever you want to call it. It really depends on what we end up doing with it as time goes on and what we're enabled to do. We've already started it up. We actually have a screen over here where we can see all 5 of the 10 terabyte drives. The RAID card all fires up, set the motherboard in UEFI mode. We can actually adjust the RAID card directly within ASUS's UEFI. That's a huge plus. Another good advantage is being that this is a windowed case. As you can see, it's not just a boring plain box. I decided not to go with something with solid side panels. I wanted something that when you look at it, it's cool, because I have 2 NASs that you saw, the white one from QNAP, and there's a black one from Thekis. It's all black, has a few blinky lights, but if you're going to build something, I figured, you know what? Let's build something that looks kind of like a gaming rig. Looks really cool, but actually has a really awesome purpose. So this thing will likely be offloaded to do a lot of things. Our RAID card's right down here. We have a slot right above it for a graphics card. So we've got room to really make this thing rock and roll and do some cool stuff depending on what kind of render offloading we want to do. I mean, hell, this may even end up becoming like we can possibly, I'm going to try virtualizing like a stream box. Like, for instance, when I'm doing game streaming for the Bare Metal Check channel, I may decide to put a capture card in this thing, or figure out something where we can offload some of the work onto this machine versus doing it all on my main rig, which easily can handle it. But if we can offload it, maybe even create a RTMP server, whatever it may be, so that this thing can do even more work. The reason I'm not setting it all up and showing you this now is initializing 50 terabytes of space in an array will take a while. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll do some follow-up videos if you guys are interested. So please let me know down in the comments if you like this kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, this is a little more insane than most people would need for like a DIY NAS, storage server, things like that. But you know what? Going with kind of my theme when it comes to bare metal tech and kind of what I do, I build everything to the 10, to the 11. I crank it up as high as it'll go, which is why, yes, RGB memory, RGB fans, RGB on the pump. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. Obviously, the RGB fans came with the cooler, so yay plus. I'm actually not a huge RGB fan myself, but putting the RGB in the case just made it a little more appealing, probably made it a little bit better of an interesting video for you guys, so you guys can check this out and see kind of some of the insane stuff you can do. You don't have to build a humdrum box to make a server. You also don't need a rack mount unit to make a server. This effectively can now be a file server for me, among many other things where I'll be storing the footage that you'll be seeing soon on YouTube. So once again, if you like this, let me know down in the comments. If you didn't like it, you know, feel free to give me a thumbs down, but let me know why. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't. I know this is probably a little nonsense to some of you. Some of you probably think it's pretty badass. There's going to be a lot more cool stuff coming, cool new products. We got Ryzen 3000 right around the corner. All these things I'm going to be taking a look at soon. So be sure to like, subscribe. Let me know anything you like. Tick the bell so you'll know when I upload new stuff. And as always, I know you have a lot of options for tech content, So I truly appreciate you tuning into mine, and let me know what you think. Join our community. Join me on Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff, so that we can give you behind the scenes sneak peeks, not just on some of the video content we're doing, but sometimes I might also sneak in some snapshots as I do the case reviews over at Tweaktown. So sometimes I'll share some of the cool stuff I'm working on, some of the new stuff that I can share that's not NDA, so that you guys can enjoy it along with me, because I love tech, I love playing with new toys, I love checking some of this new stuff out, and I really hope you do too. And I hope you join me on the next one. Thanks for joining, and have a great day. If you like what you see here and you want to get the newest content from Bare Metal Tech right away, be sure to subscribe, tick the bell, go to our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, give those a like, join the community, so that you will see not only the newest content going up, but also some behind the scenes as we release pictures of new stuff, or even some behind the scenes small video clips showing some of the bloopers, fun stuff we do here, along with the newest stuff we are playing with that'll be coming out in videos soon.